Welcome to another Chalk or Not segment. This week, we're covering UFC Vegas 105, which has a total of, I believe, 8 or 9 chalky spots out of the entire 13 fight card. Again, my definition for a chalked spot is anything that is minus 185 or wider. So any favorite that you see that is minus 185 or wider, people normally like to either parlay them or put down a heavy bet just to try to, extract as much value as they can from some of these chalky spots. So I'm hoping that this is a great guide for you guys, whether you're looking to parlay or play straight up chalky favorites. I'm hoping you help you avoid some landmines and maybe cash some parlays or cash some straight up free chalky tickets. So hopefully you guys have been enjoying this segment and very happy with the response that I've been getting as of late as well. All right, first matchup up for this Chalk or Not segment is going to be Victor Henry coming in at minus 205 as he takes on Pedro Falcao. Now, Henry has actually taken some decent action over the last couple of days as he was closer to minus 165 a few days ago. Now he finds himself at minus 205, considered a chalky spot, and I'm more than happy with this spot. Henry is a legitimate veteran with tons of experience under his belt. He normally puts on a relentless pace with his output and his striking and his volume-based approach. A lot of movement, a lot of pressure, and some decent wrestling skills. Falcao, BJJ black belt, often looks to take opponents to the ground and try to submit them, but I think he'll struggle to get Henry to the ground, and then I think he's going to struggle even more with the output that's coming back his way from Henry. So I'm more than happy to claim Victor Henry as being a chalk-worthy spot in this fight. All right, next up, Loma Lookboonmee going up against Estela Nunes. Lookboonmee coming in at minus 650 and coming off a bit of a layoff, but I think this is a great stylistic matchup for her. Nunes is a solid Muay Thai specialist, but I think she will struggle as she starts to face resistance from Lookboonmee, and as we've seen in pretty much every single Nunes fight in the UFC, she starts to fall off in terms of effectiveness in deeper water, and that's where I fully expect Loma to start pulling away. Look for this to be a competitive first round, but after Lookboonmee gets this into the second round, I think we'll see her start to pull away with her combination striking, mixing in that Muay Thai clinch, and I wouldn't even be surprised if she looks to take this fight to the ground and squash Nunes there as well. So I'm happy to consider Lookboonmee to be a chalk-worthy spot in this fight. She's right at the limit of what I would consider for chalk, and as you guys will see later on in this segment, there is a spot that I feel good about, but would not take the chalk considering the number that it's at. All right, next up, Diani Barbosa, minus 900 going up against Diana Belbita. And lo and behold, this is the spot that I'm talking about. I thought this matchup was a little bit further down the list here, but it is actually the next one. And although I think Barbosa runs through Belbita here, I think she can get her down with relative ease and then apply her BJJ where she'll have a significant advantage. And I think that will lead to her getting a submission in the first or second round. At minus 900 though, we're assuming that happens 90% of the time. You know, if Belbita has worked on her takedown defense enough to keep this fight standing, she has a bit of a striking advantage, and that could be enough for her to start pulling away with this matchup if Barbosa starts to struggle on those early takedown attempts. I don't see it happening, but at 90% indicated in a sport as volatile as mixed martial arts, I have to pass on that spot. I would have been happy to parlay her around that minus 500, minus 600 she found herself a few days ago, but with the amount of people parlaying her now, she's come to an unplayable price, which is why I'm going to have to put her in the not chalk-worthy spot. Our next up, Louis Gurul coming in at minus 240, going up against Ode Osborne. I'm a big Gurul fan, following him from his Fury FC days to the Contender Series, which he accepted on short notice against an undefeated killer like Nick Piccinini and being able to come out on top in that matchup. And now seeing him go up against a guy in Ode Osborne, which in my opinion is a step down from Nick Piccinini. I love Gurul in the spot. I think the pace and pressure that he applies will keep Osborne uncomfortable. And as we've often seen with Osborne, he starts to slow down with his effectiveness in the second and third rounds. And that's where I really think Gurul can start putting that pressure on, showcasing his cardio edge and just his pace and pressure that normally breaks all of his opponents, which is why he has an undefeated record. And I expect him to go to 11-0 on his UFC debut here as he finishes Osborne in the final round. And yes, I think he is chalk-worthy in this fight. All right, next up, we got Torres Finney coming in at minus 240, going up against Robert Valentin. Fun matchup here. Finney finally making it to the UFC. Strong grappler, an absolute behemoth of a man, but often starts to slow down later on in his matchups. We have seen him obviously put together an undefeated record, but once he starts facing legitimate resistance and starts slowing down even more to the point that he's vulnerable, that's where guys like Valentin might be able to take advantage of him. Valentin is very aggressive, very violent, and he's not going to make it easy for Finney to establish these dominant positions. And I think that we'll see constant work from Valentin that pushes this fighter into deeper waters that could make things very tricky for Finney. Thus, close to 70% or just over 70% indicated here for Finney, I do not think is fair. I think Valentin is better than that line indicates. I am picking him to win with very low confidence. Thus, I'm going to have to put Finney in the not chalk-worthy category. Next up, Brad Tavares coming in at minus 240, going up against Gerald Meerschaert. We know Meerschaert is the perennial underdog, a guy that often goes out there, finds himself on the back end of things, but always finds, or not always, but more often than not, finds ways to get his hand raised, considering how durable, how gritty, and how smothering he is with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu approach. Now, I've often given Brad Tavares the benefit of the doubt because of the run that he's been on as of late. I have to start pulling that out. I think that the age and the miles and the fights are really starting to catch up to Brad Tavares, which is why we are seeing less and less dominant performances from him and less resistance as he starts fighting opponents that provide legitimate competition. And I think Meerschaert, this is a fight that is very winnable for him. This is a fight where Tavares does not provide much of a knockout threat. And I think that if Meerschaert can keep his foot on the gas here and really start to work to get this fight into the grappling realm, he'll be successful in doing so and eventually pulling off a classic Gerald Meerschaert round 2 or round 3 submission. So I got to go Meerschaert here, thus putting Tavares in the not chalk-worthy category. All right, next up, Kennedy Nzechukwu coming in at minus 310, going up against Martin Buday. Buday is a guy that I've been high on in the past, but his recent performances have begged to differ. He is a guy that has not showcased the level of talent that I saw from earlier in his career. Normally, he's a guy that utilizes a violent clinch to wear his opponents down, really start mixing in the dirty boxing and knees in the clinch, and then start pulling away with his cardio advantage, which is something that, is very beneficial in a heavyweight division. Here against Nzechukwu, he's going to be at an athleticism disadvantage, a power disadvantage, and I think that this is a spot that Nzechukwu could really touch up Buday and possibly even put him away. But we know Nzechukwu is a flaky fighter. Buday has the tools to make this very intriguing and very close. And I think if he can get back to those days of just grinding guys down, Nzechukwu is going to give up a lot of the time off the with having his back on the cage, and that could lead to some rounds or some moments being scored in Buday's favor. Thus, at minus 310, I think it's a little bit too wide here for Nzechukwu. I'm picking Nzechukwu to win, but to trust him at this price tag against a guy that is capable of what Buday is capable of if he shows up, you can't be that overly confident in the Nzechukwu side. So I'm going to put Nzechukwu in the not chalk-worthy category. All right, co-main event, Joanderson Brito coming in at minus 230, going up against Pat Sabatini. Now, I'm a big Joanderson Brito fan, but I was very surprised with him getting stifled the way that he did against William Gomez. I thought Joanderson won that fight, but considering how close fighters are able to make it, especially if they're able to engage Brito in the grappling realm and keeping him in defensive positions, Brito often has fights closer than they should be. Now, he is a guy that's very aggressive. When he is at open space and able to dictate the pace, he is a guy that often stays in his opponent's space, his face, continuously pushing forward, not giving them any room to breathe, throwing big power shots, and often making it look very convincing. But if Sabatini can get off on his chain wrestling here and keep Brito in these bad spots, things start to get really shaky for Brito because he's consistently on the defensive. But I don't think that Sabatini can keep it up for a full 15 minutes without getting his chin checked. Now, all 3 of the last losses on Sabatini's record have come by knockout, all in the first round and relatively quickly, and Brito is more than capable of providing that type of resistance here. I'm going to ever so slightly lean with Brito being chalk-worthy because I believe in his power, his ability to shuck off the takedowns in the second and third rounds. That's going to make Sabatini very uncomfortable. I don't think Sabatini will be able to get to his wrestling in deeper water, and I think that we'll see Brito start to dictate the pace, eventually land a big shot, and put Sabatini away by knockout. So, like I said, I'm going to go Brito being chalkworthy in this fight. All right, that brings us to our main event now between Lerone Murphy, who comes in at minus 330, going up against Josh Emmett. Now, I think this is a very winnable fight for Lerone Murphy. You know, Josh Emmett obviously has a ton of power, has some decent wrestling in his back pocket, but being 40 years old, fighting a guy that's in his prime, like Lerone Murphy, 15-0-1 record, I think that this is a spot that Emmett will ultimately have to respect and cave into the pace that Lerone Murphy is going to be fighting this fight at. You know, mixing in the clinch, mixing in the takedowns. I think Murphy is clean enough in the striking realm to avoid too much danger there. And we know if Emmett can't get that knockdown or multiple knockdowns, then he's kind of at the whim of how his opponents are going to be looking to attack fights. And I think Murphy can more often than not really separate himself in these spots by mixing in the clinch, mixing in the wrestling, landing his speed, landing his stinging power. And I think he can win at minimum 4 out of the 5 rounds to win this fight on the scorecards, and I think he can do it relatively convincingly. Thus, I'm going to put him in the chalkworthy spot. You know, Emmett's coming back from a long layoff. He's 40 years old. Usually not a great sign for a featherweight, and I think that Lerone Murphy is more than enough to snuff here, and I think he'll be able to get the win, like I said, showcasing that he is a chalkworthy fighter. All right, there you guys go. Chalk or not for UFC Vegas 105. I'll be back for the quick picks version of this breakdown. Reminder, PFL kicks off their calendar year as well this week with a card on Friday. Yesterday, I dropped my full card breakdown for that card, so make sure you guys check out the YouTube page for that. I'll have track plays, obviously, on the Lock of the Night Patreon page for that as well. And then, obviously, keep your eyes tuned on this YouTube page as I drop segments and breakdowns every single day for the upcoming UFC card. So make sure you guys check it out. All right, I'll see you guys again tomorrow for the quick picks. Peace.